السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. أما بعد. Thank you for everybody joining again for another week of Cult Conversations. And now we're going to continue going through our overview of the book, Sufi Lighthouse. I do suggest that everybody get the book. It's only like $27 on Amazon. Very beneficial. As you'll see today, this is like just the first chapter. We just did the first chapter last week, and even we're finishing up the first chapter this week. You'll see just with the few Q&As that he included in the book, you'll see how it directly actually applies to the stuff that we've dealt with in our own experiences dealing with the cult of TMOA. So we'll just go over what we talked about last week. And real quick, I'm just going to, and if there's any questions, please go ahead and jump in and ask any questions that you may have about last week's topics. That's fine. There's no timeline or deadline for us to get through all this material. I mean, the book is, goodness gracious, it is 500 and something pages, almost 600 pages. You see it's like 2 or 3 inches thick. So, like, it might take us forever to get through it. But inshallah, we'll be learning. And if you get it yourself, you can read the book and go ahead of us. So last week, the first question was, is the Sufi path a cult? When we talked about how there's no set definition of a cult and you have to look at the cult characteristics. And the common theme is that they deceive in order to gain the trust of another human being. And that trust is the main way that they deceive people or take advantage of people. Then we talked about the question of what is the most difficult aspect of spiritual abuse from which to recover. And again, that depends on the person. Everybody has a different experience. It could be financial, psychological, emotional, social, and spiritual. But everybody kind of feels a sense of betrayal or mistrust. So we talked about that. The other question was, what types of people are drawn to situations of spiritual abuse? And we talked about there's a misconception that people that get caught in cults or get fooled to being in cults or spiritual abuse, that they're weak, that they're stupid, which is not the case. Everybody is vulnerable. It basically, if you have the capability to trust somebody, then you are vulnerable. And only people that are have some kind of psychological disorders aren't capable of trusting others. Okay. So pretty much everybody's open to being a victim of spiritual abuse or being sucked into a cult. The next thing that we talked about was hold on one second. Okay. So the next thing we talked about was once someone recognizes the abuse, the cult isn't leaving straightforward. And the answer is no. It's, as we know, it's very complex. It's very tricky to navigate through exiting a cult or getting out of a spiritually abusive situation. And we know that, there's social issues. There's some people might be financially tied. Some people, a lot of people suffer from Stockholm syndrome. So there's that. What else do we got here? And I think was this another one? It's the next question. So we have 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Okay. So I think this is the last question we covered last week. Is recovery just a matter of time, time healing all wounds? Not necessarily. Time does help with any type of abusive situation or any type of trauma that someone goes through. But the one important thing that we mentioned, which I'll reiterate again, is that it's very important to connect with others, whether it be a therapist, whether it be an imam, and the best way is to connect with people that have gone through similar situations, that kind of know what you went through. Even if, for instance, we talked about the benefit of R2F, of everybody coming from the cult of TMOA that realized it's a cult and wanted to be separated from it, then we connected in our own social network, and it's helped all of us that have that connection and have those ties to be able to recover a lot faster than people that try to do it by themselves. Especially, we hear about it, or we should hear about it all the time about, African American community that we have like kind of like a double whammy: African American community, Muslim African American. Like, we don't seek therapy, we don't seek help, right? We just get over things and kind of try to move on or deal with it ourselves. Where we should seek help. We should seek to talk to people about these things. Personally, when I wrote that book, Gingerbread Man, that was like one of the best therapeutical things I did, because I got everything out of me onto paper and shared it with others. And then that allowed me to connect with other people who felt the same exact way, and realize like it's not just me. I'm not just crazy. And we kind of get into that with these other questions. So this week we're going to kind of jump right into it. Again, this is an open conversation. If anybody has anything to say, if anybody has comments, you could type them in the chats. I'm looking at YouTube and also on the Zoom. You can type in the chat. You can unmute yourself. Whatever you need to do to kind of share your thoughts or your feelings or ask questions or whatever. And we don't have to stick to. There's no script. I have my general things that I will talk about. We don't have to get to all of them. If we want to just talk about something unrelated that comes up or that someone's dealing with in their lives, you're free to share and free to ask questions. Okay, so the next question, and he has 10 questions in the first chapter. So the sixth question that he has is this right here. And he says, the question is, well, that doesn't make much sense. Let me edit that. Let's see. Are spiritually abusive people easy to identify? So that's the question. Are spiritually abusive people easy to identify? And so he brings up just a couple of tactics, or like why it's not that easy to sometimes it's not that easy to identify spiritually abusive people. I will say though, especially after you have kind of waken up to it and you've been a victim of spiritual abuse, it's easy to identify it after that. It's like once you've been through it, you know exactly what it is. Once you've seen it, you see it all over the place. Very easy to identify. We're tracking this one guy that is doing the same thing, but it's easy to identify their tactics once you experience it. That's why this book is helpful, even for those people that don't necessarily think that they're in a cult. There's a lot of people, like, for instance, TMOA, that, we're not in a cult, this is a great religious group or whatever. Okay, then entertain me or do this challenge. Go and read this book and see if you think the same way after you get done reading it. Even after a few chapters, you'll be like, wow, I'm in a cult. So are spiritually abusive people easy to identify? One of the things that spiritually abusive people do, or cult leaders, like I'm always going to talk about in context of cult leaders, because that's like what we've dealt with. Even though this stuff does happen on smaller levels, whether it be within families or smaller organizations within masjid, it happens on smaller levels. But I'm talking about the biggest level, which is talking about a cult, right? So muddying the waters. This is a tactic that cult leaders do. They muddy the waters. They use misdirection, reframing, and something called consensual validation. The best way I can explain that is basically they use the characteristics that we have in humanity to groupthink, right? So misdirection, right? How does, like, in the context of TMOA, we got a lot of TMOA members that are listening, or will watch this. What is misdirection? Misdirection is when you're throwing people in opposite directions, right? And bringing them back to the center, and then constantly not letting them have a standard place to understand what you're really saying. And just recently we had Zainab Adams release, she didn't release it, but she had a meeting, and she was using misdirection, whether she was actively doing it or just doing it out of nature, because this is how she was taught. She was saying things that were contradictory to each other, openly contradictory to each other. For instance, she was saying, um, Mubarak Jelani's children, Fatima Jelani, Mudassar Jelani, all of them, they committed treason. They've been oppressing her and transgressing against her and all these different things, right? Then at the same time, she said, but respect them and give them tea. These are conflicting things. This is misdirection. So at one hand, she's saying that they're the enemies, right? They're the enemies of the Jamaat. They're trying to destroy the Jamaat. But then on the other hand, she's saying, but give them tea. That's misdirection, right? Misdirection, you'll see also, like, and if you bring it down to a smaller context, if anybody's dealt with, or like, we've all seen movies, we've seen documentaries. If you pay attention to these characteristics, they show up everywhere. So even a spiritually abusive person or an abusive person will use the same tactics individually. So, like, for instance, an individual will, someone that, say, domestic violence, they're abusing their spouse, right? Whether it's a male or a female, well, men and women both commit domestic violence, right? One day they're extremely mean, rude, maybe distant. Then the next day they're like giving them so much love and affection. You'll see this in like where there's actually physical abuse. One day they're beating the crap out of their spouse. Then the next day they're all lovey-dovey, giving them all the love, and you don't know where you stand. So that's misdirection, right? So you can't really figure out, like, okay, wait, is this person like a cult leader or not? They use reframing a lot. And again, we're gonna use the context that we have, like, right. I can go back to Mubarak Jelani's discourses and point those all out, but he's dead. He's dealing with what he has to deal with, But great with Noor Zainab Adams meeting, right? Reframing. So we all seen the video where her brother Hussein Adams was like being very disrespectful, very belligerent, very threatening to Mudassar and his mother Naima. Even Naima was, kind of maybe in it a little bit, or instigating the situation, but you've seen how his behavior was, right? And we all know that for the last 2 years, Zainab Adams was fighting to keep all these properties. So what she do? She came back and she told a totally different story, made themselves the victims, and how they're not fighting for this. They're trying to give up like, you just totally tell a different story. So that's what happens. You kind of reframe everything, even with like think about your own situations. For those of you who have left TMOA, left the cult, maybe even got kicked out of the cult or whatever, right? You know your story. You know the facts of the story, good or bad, of what happened. But when you go back and talk to people in TMOA, people that will tell you this, like, oh, I heard this, that, and the third happened. I heard you did this. I heard you did that. That's reframing the story. Like, even with my own story, right? I wrote the Sheikh a letter, basically determined he was a cult, made a decision for me and my family to leave the Jamaat, right? Then after that, they started attacking me. Then they kicked me out the Jamaat. Then they coerced my ex-wife to divorce and leave with the kids, and all this stuff happened after. But instead, what they do is they reframe the story and say, oh no, he's only speaking out because his wife left him, right? Even though, like, I already left Jamaat, I already decided that I was done with him. I already decided it was a cult. I already wrote all the stuff I did led to the attack to TMOA, where people, but that's what they do. They reframe stories. And then consensual validation. That's basically groupthink. Cult leaders and abusive people know that when there's groups, people fall into groupthink. So even though you're the one person, like, say, in your household, in your family, maybe even on your land, where you're like, wait, something isn't wrong. Did I just hear what I thought I heard, or did I just see what I thought I saw? But then everybody else is, right, all it takes is one or two people with strong enough voices to say, no, that didn't happen, or this is okay. Then all of a sudden, everybody else starts saying, oh yeah, it's okay. Like, we can even go back to, for instance, Mubarak Jelani's alleged he moved the moon. Nobody seen him move the moon except allegedly a couple of people, right? All it took was those couple of people to say, yeah, I seen him move the moon. And all of a sudden you have a whole community saying, oh yeah, he moved the moon, he moved the moon. And then people even will testify and even not even know it, that in their mind they made up a whole story in their head, pictured the whole thing, and then now they think they actually saw the thing, but it didn't happen. Look at the, like, alleged miracles in TMOA, in that cult. oh, this is Allah's name, this is Prophet Muhammad's name, I seen this, I seen that. That's all a function of groupthink, right? People just start seeing and thinking the same things. They keep people off balance. That all plays into the misdirection. There's one individual, no, I won't say his name, but he was before he got kicked out, he was Mubarak Jalani was giving him orders like, okay, I need you to go to this country. Then as soon as that person got to that country, they're like, okay, now I need you to go back to the country you came from, right? Simply just sending him from like traveling all over the place and giving him like unrealistic timelines. Like, and for instance, one individual just got kicked out the Jamaat because they were at a janazah in Georgia and they were like, we need you in New York or Virginia. I forgot what it was, like in 2 hours. And the person was like, I'm in Georgia. I'm at a janazah. There's no way I can get there in that time frame. Okay, you're kicked out, right? So this all does is create a space for that as an individual when you're starting to recognize like, wait, something is wrong, right? And at the bottom it talks about being stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? So I'm spending too much time on this question, but it's very good to know this stuff. So you get stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? So the rock is that you are recognizing, yeah, something's wrong. This doesn't seem right. This isn't normal, right? Especially us, like when we our contact with TMWA, like I was part of TMWA pretty much practically since I was like 15, 16 years old, right? Many of the people were born and raised in it. But then when you become an adult or even like a teenager, you're like, wait, man, some of this stuff isn't right. This isn't right. Something's wrong. And maybe you can't put your finger on it, but maybe like there's some certain things that are wrong, but then you get that's the rock. Then the hard place is like you've been taught and brainwashed to think like, no, this all is good. This cult is good. This is gonna get you to Jannah. This is, this place, this spiritual leader, this sheikh, Allah, they're a wali of Allah and they're gonna guide you and all these different things. So you're stuck in that weird zone, right? So you start pricking yourself, right? A lot of people, I call it the swamp. A lot of people get stuck in this swamp where, and there's another question that ties directly to this that we'll get to, where they see like Mubarak Jalani is doing bad things, right? But because there's an excuse they can give, remember we talked about the plausible deniability, that they'll say, oh, it's not Mubarak Jalani, it's the administration, right? It's Khalifa so-and-so, it's Amira so-and-so, right? Even people are doing that today where they're saying, okay, yeah, I know that the Imam of Muslims cannot be a female. The hadith is very clear. So they recognize that. But instead they'll say, oh, well, you know what? This has nothing to do with the cult. It has nothing to do with the Sheikh Mubarak Jalani, because they'll say maybe Zainab Adams is doing this by herself and she's wrongfully seizing authority. However, they block out of their mind that Mubarak Jalani ordered everybody to take bayat to Zainab Adams over 10 years ago when he was alive. It was a direct order from him. So that's where people get stuck. So the short answer to this question, are spiritually abusive people easy to identify? No, especially when you're caught up into it. When you're inside the fishbowl, it's hard to see that you're part of a cult. But once you step out of it, it's very easy to recognize a cult and recognize spiritual abusive people. So Mubarak Jalani, is to context the TMOA, that's the cult that a lot of us came from. Mubarak Jalani was straight up a cult leader. It's very easy to identify. The leaders after him, Zainab Adams, Hussein Adams, whatever Jalani's children are involved, they're all cult leaders as well. When you hear them speak, you hear a cult leader. You hear them using the same tactics, the same verbiage, the same rhetoric, the same techniques, right? So it's very easy to identify. Like for us that are out of it, it's very easy to identify. Let's see, I got a message. Hold on 1 second, y'all. Okay. So, walaikum salam. How you doing, brother? Okay. Let's see. Next slide. If I can get there. What are you doing? Oh, you got a question, Lawrence Whitley?
Yes, I have a question. Yeah, wait, son, I have a question. What,
Yep.
how, and what does how and what the how does a member be stopped by a member of the cult to communicate with people that are out of the cult? What I'm trying to make is that you got people still in TMOA, right? They hands down in TMOA. They talk to people that's been outside of TMOA and everything, but they want to leave TMOA, but they can't leave TMOA. We know the constraints, the family being on the land, blah blah blah. But how
Right.
does the cult stop the people? What techniques do they use to stop the people from communicating with people outside of the cult
So
who are successful?
it's
Who are how do they
it
hinder that from the
depends.
person still in the cult? Okay, you got me.
Yeah, it depends. It really depends. So the question is, how do cults prevent people from and correct me if I'm wrong, one, prevent people from leaving the cult, and two, prevent them from like communicating with people that have like left the cult, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing is like, how do they stop people from leaving the cult? And there's different tactics that different cults use depending how much control they have. So like if you've seen any cult documentaries, some go extreme to like they will like kidnap and grab people off the street and say like, no, you cannot leave, right? Like someone like you'll see stories of like especially like these Christian type cults that go off and live in just like how PMOA does, go off and live in some off woods where there's no connection to civilization. Then you hear about people like they're trying to escape to town, and they will actually send members of the cult to go get them and bring them back, lock them up, re-educate them as they call it, basically re-brainwash them to get them to stay. That's more of an extreme form of that. A lot of what you see is exactly what happens in TMOA, right? Where, and this is like the misdirection type of thing. So, and you've seen it in Zainab Adams' audio. You've seen Mubarak Jelani say it all the time. You've seen his administration say all the time. What do they say all the time? We don't need anybody, right? We only need one talib. We only need one person. We don't need anybody. We don't need any followers. This is a law's mission. That's a tactic to actually keep people in the cult, right? Because what it does is make you exclusive. So when you look at something, and it's a mental thing that we do as human beings, that we look at something that says, okay, this is exclusive. And when you see something that's exclusive, that increases the demand, right? So for instance, diamonds. Diamonds are worth a lot of money. Why? Because there's idea that they're rare, right? They're pretty, but like there's businesses or jewel collectors that have like thousands and thousands of diamonds that they just keep on storage because if they knew that they just put this all out in the market, guess what? The price drops, right? You have businesses that will only create a certain amount of a product because if they create too much of the product, it's like, oh, they can just get it everywhere. So why would it cost a lot of money? You see what I'm saying? It's the same thing with cult mentality where you think, oh, this is exclusive. They don't need me. And it's a trick because it makes it seem like, oh, they don't need me. That means they must be sincere. That means they must be like trustworthy because they're not actually trying to keep me here. Yes, they are trying to keep you here because on the flip side, they say, we don't need anybody. We don't want anybody. All we need is one follower, right? But at the same time, they say, but you have to pay your membership dues. If you leave, you're going to go to hell. If you leave, you're not going to be a real Muslim, right? And the other part of that is, so that's the one technique that they use, is they use that just mental trick to get people to say, oh, I need to be a part of this for my salvation. Because people were born and raised in this to say, oh, if you leave the Jamaat, you're not going to be a Muslim. Allah's going to be displeased with you. That's it. That's the first and foremost spiritual abusive thing. You connect your hereafter and your relationship with Allah with your relationship with this cult or with the sheikh. Okay, that's the first way that they keep people in the community. Okay, The second way is there's all these psychological manipulations. Like, for instance, like I said, the one, if you leave, you're going to be a Muslim. You're not going to be Muslim anymore, or not going to be a real Muslim. If you leave, Allah's going to be displeased with you. If you leave, some horrible things going to happen. You're going to be cursed and all that. And what they do is, right? And this is what the reframing is. So, and that's why it's very important for people that leave TMOA to be very visible in your success. And it's not even like a showing off thing, right? Because it's all about intentions. When you show your success just to like, oh yeah, I'm successful, look at me, that's showing off. But showing the blessings that Allah gave you for the purposes of destroying that narrative that are pushed in cults. Because what do cults say? What does it say in TMOA? Oh, everybody at least TMOA has a horrible life, right? And they'll point to a very few specific examples because, yeah, there are people that leave cults, and because of how they're raised, whether it's the trauma they went through, whatever, they might leave Islam, they might be on drugs, but they're already having these issues while they're in a cult. But the point to them is like, oh, you see so-and-so? Yeah, they got arrested, right? You see so-and-so, they're in the street, they're doing drugs. The point to those is like, that's like what happens when people leave the cult. When in reality, the majority of people, because now we have people that are connecting and their social media, we see that, wait, that person left the cult and now they're buying houses, right? They're taking care of their family. They're traveling across the road, the world. They're making Umrah. They're making Hajj. They're learning their Islam. They're becoming scholar, like all these different things, to destroy that narrative, because people are stuck in the cult because they think, if I leave, my life is going to somehow be worse than what I don't, like if I stay. So that's how they keep people in. How do they keep people from talking to people that left the cult is the same exact techniques that kind of I mentioned, right? Because people are afraid of that stigma that comes with it. Oh, if I associate with this person, I'm going to get kicked out, or they're going to look down on me, or like I'm going to lose my status, right? So there's people in the cult, like for instance, if a person's an administrator, whether they're part of the Shura Council, or they're a mayor, or they're just somebody that like has high status because they volunteer all their time to do the cult leader's bidding, right? They don't want a chance losing that status by being seen in the street with someone who's been deemed an enemy of the Jamaat. Like there was one individual, right, with my brother, that behind the scenes, he was like friends with him. He would call him, talk to him, right? They'd go to basketball games, but they were scheduled to go to like this big basketball game in like Massachusetts, right? Or this tournament. And then the guy was like, well, I can't go with you because I don't want people to, if people see me with you, then they're going to kick me out the Jamaat and I'm going to lose my wife and kids. That's literally how they think. So that's like the main way they keep people from associating with them, is like that's the stigma that comes with this. Oh, what were you doing hanging out with so-and-so, right? They don't want that. They don't want to get kicked out. Hope that answers it. But there's other techniques too, but that's like the main way. Let's see. Again, if there's any questions, jump on in or type it in the chat, inshallah. Next slide. So, what are the consequences after waking up? Yeah. So there are a lot, like you say, it says consequences, but it's more about like, what are the negative things that happen after you kind of wake up and realize you're in a cult? And again, this is one of those questions where it just varies for everybody. It really varies for everybody. Like I said, there could be some financial things. There could be social issues that you face. There could be family. Like you could lose, most likely you might lose most of your friends and family, right? Or in the very least, there'll be strained relationships with your friends and family, people that you grew up with all your life, whether it's your siblings, parents, children, whatever it is. They might not cut you off, but there's always like this elephant in the room, right? Or they'll start treating you different. Okay. But there's also the ones that were mentioned in the book was shame, right? You even though you woke up, you feel shame because like, I've been duped. I wasted X amount of years of my life with this crap, and this dude was a fraud. This whole thing was a fraud and fake. People suffer from symptoms of depression. And the most common four things that people said that they felt was a sense of betrayal, because that really what it is. It's a sense of it's betray the cult leader, the fake sheikh or whatever, the fake sheikha now. It's a betrayal because this person was supposed to help guide you and make you a better Muslim, and they actually didn't do that at all. Let's see, self-doubt, and that's something. And the self-doubt thing, it came up, we talked about it last show, but it manifests itself in different ways, right? Myself included, and I hear others as well say the same thing, is like, I don't trust none of these scholars or sheikhs or anybody, right? You don't trust anybody, but you're doubting others, but it actually comes from a place of self-doubt, because basically you are protecting yourself from being fooled again, right? So you're saying, okay, I'm going to withhold my trust, right? Because I don't trust myself to use it wisely. So instead, I'm going to look at everybody doubtful and sinister, that they have and really Islamically, what we should do from this perspective is that we have been taught a great lesson, is that besides Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, everybody has faults, right? Everybody has faults. Rasulullah was the most perfect human being, okay? Even he made mistakes, okay? So anything less than him, you're going to see faults. People are going to make mistakes. People are going to have different negative characteristics, but you can still benefit from them. Doesn't mean you can't trust them, right? It doesn't mean that they're always out to get your money or that they're fake scholars, but what it does cause us to do is that we should do more of more effort into verifying that these people are scholars, that these people are trustworthy, instead of just blindly throwing our trust out there, right? For instance, in TMOA, a lot of us blindly threw our trust out there to a sheikh that's in Pakistan that really was not a scholar, was not someone that was recognized in the Ummah, and really had no interest in seeing the community or any of us benefit or better ourselves, right? It was just all self-interest. But nowadays we have the internet, we have social media, we have all these connects that we say, oh, look, look at Sheikh so-and-so. He's on YouTube. He's saying a lot of good things. I like his style. Can I trust him? Right? But we can go look like, oh, he went to so-and-so university. Oh, he's not actually trying to lead anybody. Oh, he's not collecting money from people and all these different things. Okay. So Lucia Mosley said, I stopped dealing with them for about 10 years, but still feel all of those. I don't trust them at all. Oh yeah. So there's a saying we have in R2F, started by Mubarak, one of the co-hosts on the R2F show. And he said, never, how did he put it?
I got you, Sheikh.
Go ahead, got you, because you say it all the time. Go ahead.
Never give a cult member the benefit of the doubt. All right. Always doubt the benefit of the cult member. All right.
Yeah. So y'all heard that? I'll put it in the chat. I'll put it on the YouTube chat. Never. Damn, I lost it again. Type it in the chat so I can put it in the YouTube chat. That's a great way to look at it, right? It's okay to have doubt, and we're supposed to have that doubt. But at the same time, we also have to have a little bit of trust, because that's how, we have to still learn our deen, which we have to like give our trust to teachers that are, authentic and verified and reliable. And, that comes part of Islam. It's actually the fact that we can trust is actually a benefit, right? First and foremost, we have to trust Allah. Okay. And we have to trust that Allah preserved this deen, preserved this religion for us to benefit from. And he preserved it with, one, the Holy Quran, and two, the Sunnah of Rasulullah. Right there, that's our like criteria for trust. Anything that violates the Quran and the Sunnah as us being Muslims, then it's like, okay, what's going on here? I'm not going to trust you because I'm going to trust the law and Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's really where like one of the problems is with the cult members is that they trust their sheikh, their leader, their whatever it is, their community. They trust that more than they trust the law and Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? Like for instance, we'll just go right back to the whole. We're going to harp on this until it's the easiest example. Rasulullah, Allah said, "Obey, hear and obey Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Follow what Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave you." There's so many times in the Quran that Allah says, "Listen to Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam," in so many words. We have to hear and obey Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, any community that takes a woman as their leader will not be successful. Very clear. Okay. However, the people in TMOA, they don't trust that. They don't trust that. And they're like, our sheikh appointed his wife as the leader. So I'm going to trust what our sheikh did. Okay. So that's the problem. So the question is, how long will these feelings last? Probably your whole life. There's no, the one thing I've learned about this is there's no like, and when we get more people involved and we get people that are like certified therapists and counselors and deal with this stuff, Amr, Baina, there's no, one thing I've learned, like there's no like end of the tunnel. Okay, there's like you will always have these feelings that you have, but it might become less severe. You could still function. Like you're never not gonna feel like a sense of doubt with dealing with some Fatima. Yeah, she's Fatima's a counselor or something. She's starting to talk about spiritual abuse as well. But there's no like, okay, I made it. It's over. I've made it to the top of the hill, and but the feelings last. Like you, depending on what you're going through or what you have been through, you'll have days where like, it's normal, but then you could be watching, a show and it can remind you of something and then you'll start feeling those feelings all over again. Right. So there's no like set date on when things just like you get over everything, but alhamdulillah, some people, sometimes the law just puts it in people's hearts and they just get over it and they move on, so there's no time frame, but it could last probably the rest of your life. Oh, let me type this in the chat. Okay. At times you will be triggered and will take you right to the moment of this is happening all over again. Yep, that's so true. So Baina, who has knowledge in counseling and therapy and psychology and these sorts of things, and she's going to be getting certified and have all the official credentials and all that. She said that like something can happen and it'll trigger you and bring you right back as if like whatever happened that's that at that moment, right? So just be used to it. Always turn to Allah. We are Muslim. Alhamdulillah, Allah has kept us Muslim. And well, if I'm speaking, but hopefully we're all Muslim. If not, I would. Next time, go ahead.
How do you immediately deal with those triggers? Because I've sometimes had those triggers, especially when I'm doing group events and
Mhm.
like I'm doing the martial art thing. So I'm
Yeah.
working in a group setting. Sometimes somebody got to be the absolute leader and talk to you like you're nobody, and then the politics, and then they got to get next to the one that's teaching and all that, and be a brown noser. And how do you immediately deal with those triggers? I mean, I got my own ways. I'm just trying to find another way.
I mean,
Okay.
Mentally,
yeah, go
mentally,
ahead.
If,
Like salam.
mentally.
Go ahead, Baina.
so
Like salam.
the thing about being triggered is you just have to be able to feel it and process it and wait for yourself to get over it. There is really no trick. It's like a trauma response. So your body has to feel that stimuli, and a lot of people don't want to face it. It's gonna hurt. Some people cry, they walk, they write, but just being aware of your triggers, which it sounds like you are, is a very good step. And then try to avoid those triggers. Like I know for me, any kind of like Sufism, spiritualness, I don't really mess with that stuff because I know how it affected me from being in the Jamaat. So I don't really watch like spiritual movies, read a lot of things about spirituality. Even like right now amongst the African American community, there's this whole like African spiritual thing going on. And if I like see that on my social media, I just avoid it because that's a big trigger for me. So avoiding your triggers, but eventually you're gonna have to face them and just let your body feel that stimuli.
Shukran. Shukran for sharing that. And yeah, absolutely right. I'm the same way. And I think a lot of us are. Like, I hear anything Sufi, I'm just like, nah, I'm good. It could be totally like legit. It could be like Sufis that are actually practicing the Quran and Sunnah, but I am just adverse to anything that says Sufi, whatever, right? Anything that even like, if I see, even like to the point, if I see people wearing turbans a certain way, I'm like, nah, I ain't messing with them. Right? It's that, but as Bana said, like we have to kind of like deal with it how we deal with it and try to not be so extreme with certain things. I remember when all this stuff first happened, like if I got triggered, I automatically will just cut whatever that was triggering off. I've throughout time, and this may be like a time kind of heals wounds thing. I've gotten better to deal with it and recognize that everybody doesn't have to deal with things the same way I deal with things. So, but shukran for sharing, Bane. That was good advice. Let's see. Amr says the important thing is to remember the maladaptive thoughts and behavior does not last. Sort of like where people have phobias and don't know, you avoid those triggers. However, there's a technique called flooding that I use where you face your fear all at once. This technique is not 100% effective for most people. The most common and successful way is gradual steps and getting used to it. Overall, up to each person and Allah knows best. Alhamdulillah, that kind of like backs up what Bain was saying is like there's not one way to deal with it. There are different techniques. She mentioned some, which were like writing, going to walk, walking it off. I've heard of like screaming in pillows, just get your cry out. There's all these different things. So look them up and maybe inshallah, Bain and Amr, if you have time, you could come up with just like a list of just some techniques and I could post it in the chat room that then people can try different things. For me, like I mentioned, that when I wrote that book, just writing it down, even before I even shared it with everybody, it was just such a good way to just get it down. And I realized like, oh no, like it's a lot clearer than I thought. Because I was going through a stage where I was like, wait, am I right about this? But then after I put it all down on paper, it was like, oh yeah, I'm more than right about this. Let's see. Next question. Okay. So it says, what forms does spiritual abuse take? So spiritual abuse takes many forms. Like I said, there's small micro abuses, I guess you can call them, correct terminology is, but then there's big. Us in TMOA that's been a part of a cult, we pretty much experienced all forms of spiritual abuse. Okay. So there's people who use spiritual abuse to, one, just get power and status, right? So as Mubarak Jelani, right, he used it because he wanted people to think that he was this big time sheikh and take advice. Like there's a lot, like it doesn't even have to be financial, right? A lot of people think, oh, it's a cult because they're trying to just get money and that's it. Some people will just do it, remain poor, and they just want people thinking that they're a hotshot. That's it. They want power, status. They want people to venerate them. Okay, it's like a narcissistic thing. But then there's money. A lot of them have like MTMOA. TMOA for the last 40 years, we made Mubarak Jelani and his family millionaires. Millionaires. Okay, they were poor, regular people from a family that had a shrine business, right, in Pakistan, and now they're a family fighting over millions of dollars, which is not even reflective of all the money that over the last 40 years that has been, misappropriated from the people. Okay, so there's money and then sex. Like we see it all the time. Watch any cult documentary. A lot of the cult leaders, they what take they start raping people, messing with children, right? 30, 40 wives, these different things. Okay. And Tiamway, look at it. Mubarak Jelani has had multiple, what was it? All three of his wives or his widows were young teenage girls while he was senior citizen. Okay. I think he was like maybe what, 40, 50 something when he married Naima, who was 12 years old, that he used it for sex. Even though it was done Islamically, they got married and all that along those best. But that being a cult leader, if he was not a cult leader, he would not have had that access to do that. He married Zainab when he was 60 something. She's 16, 17 years old, another teenager. This is not normal. Even in Islam, this is not normal. Maybe some cultures that are a little bit different than our, but definitely not in African American culture. And then when he's 70 something, he marries another 16 or 17-year-old. Okay. Not to mention that he's had a total of 7 wives. Okay. So that's using being a spiritual abusive cult leader to get sex. So there's financial abuse, sexual abuse. Those are different. So any type of abuse you can think of, or some way to exploit somebody, spiritual abuse takes those forms. It's basically, so spiritual abuse, if you look at it, and next week we're going to talk about the definitions, inshallah, more, so get a better idea. Spiritual abuse is an all-encompassing type of thing. Yes, it is an abuse, but also it's a tactic used to groom people to get your objective, right? So for instance, say in a person's, we'll look at the Catholic Church, right? Look at the Catholic Church. We all know about pedophiles in the Catholic Church, right? Movies been made about it and all types of reports. We've all heard about this. In those situations, the priest's goal was to get sex, right? To sexually abuse somebody, sexually abuse a child. And to facilitate that abuse, they use spiritual abusive tactics to get that. So what they do, they use their position to get a loan with the child, right? They use their position and their knowledge of the scripture to kind of make the child feel that it's okay. Oh, you have to serve the leader. This is for God, whatever, right? So spiritual abuse can be used as a tactic, and it could be the actual abuse itself. Okay. The biggest issue with spiritual abuse, as he mentions, is excuse me, that religiously, well, no matter what religion we're talking about, we're speaking about it in Islamic context, because as Muslims, we believe Islam is the true religion, right? That it's the only way to salvation. It's the only way to actually properly worship and live our lives. Okay. We connect ourselves with this cult leader because we thought that this person will be able to guide us to practice our religion correctly, to get a spiritual guide, right? They're going to take us to the highest levels of our religion or spirituality. That's the biggest form of abuse that it takes on, because that person is not that person. Okay. So just imagine, right? We are in a jungle and we go to a guide, and it's like, okay, this guide is going to lead us out the jungle. If we don't get out the jungle, we're going to die. And what we essentially did is we picked a guide that said, oh yeah, I know the way out, but had no idea how to get out the jungle. And we're following them, and they're getting us lost. Sometimes maybe they get us close to the exit, but then they actually don't get us there. And sometimes they take us back further back than where we were, right? Which happens most of the time. That's the biggest issue. And it's very important to know, as Muslims, this is the biggest issue, right? Because we can lose our money, right? We can waste our time praising somebody that didn't deserve our praise, and they had power over us and control all things. Even though it's hard to accept. It's even worse than someone who's been sexually abused, right? Because the whole goal why we're here as Muslims is to worship Allah and get the Jannah, okay? And if someone is taking us away from that objective, and they're faking that they can get us to that objective, that is the biggest issue with spiritual abuse. How many times have we seen, especially from TMOA, that we look at somebody from TMOA, an ex-member, someone that left, that they just left Islam completely? How many of us have went through different changes in our spirituality or our iman or our relationship with Allah because of growing up in this cult? And it's because we associate the negativity with Islam, right? And that's part of the problem of that being between a rock and a hard place. So we're like, wait a minute. My whole life, I was taught by my parents and everybody around me that this guy was the ultimate representative of Islam. This guy, this community, these leaders, however you associate, but this guy, this leader, this whoever transgressed upon me, whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's stealing money, whether it's physical abuse, whatever it is, and that's supposed to represent Islam. Of course, the natural reaction is like, okay, I don't want any of that, especially if you've been taught that that is true Islam. Why would anybody want to stay with that? Okay. It takes us, so people go through changes. People like, you'll see women like, they take off their veils, they start, dressing differently. They want to live part of the secular life. And then you see people come back like, okay, that ain't it. And then they learn true Islam. We've all went through different forms of that, right? So like, not to say that it's right and we shouldn't try to guide people and, prevent the wrong and enjoying the good. But when we see people from like TMOA and we see like, okay, us guys who do it all the time, we'll see, sister on car, you see so-and-so, she's out the Jamaat, she stopped covering. Well, let's ask why. Let's see who, Allah knows best how culpable TMOA is for that. But we still try to advise some people and say, hey, Allah wants this, what we experience is not a true Islam. Yeah, go ahead, Bana, jump right in.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think another element to what you're saying is because like in TMOA, they don't teach you proper fear of Allah. So a lot of times people commit, like I know for myself, doing things, but making sure like people in the Jamaat don't see you doing them. Because I've learned fear from Allah from TMOA, not from what after I left TMOA, but while I was there, the focus was more on, the sheikh and making him proud and making Jamaat members proud, but they don't really teach you like we know as Muslims, of course, that you're supposed to fear Allah, but it doesn't really get into depth. So a lot of people do things because they don't have the proper fear or connection with Allah and knowing their relationship with Him because they want to put the sheikh first, then Prophet Muhammad Islam, then Allah.
That's a great point. And just to give people a real live example is if you look at that audio, that meeting that meeting that Zainab Adams had, she didn't mention anything about fearing Allah. She didn't mention any ayats or anything. It was all about, they're the enemies of my Murshid. They've talked about my Murshid, and that's that same thing. It's like we've all done it where you're more like I'm just remembering like you're sneaking around that you have a dish on your house so you can watch TV so that people in the Jamaat don't find you or the leaders don't find you, or you have a TV or you have Netflix and you don't want people to see your mailbox. Remember, they used to send the DVDs to your mailbox, like, I go get my mail real quick. I want no one to know I have Netflix, right? Meanwhile, Allah is seeing all this, and that's a real good point. And people in TMOA have to really, if they're listening to this, really have to reflect on that. Is why do I fear my cult leader or my community more than I fear Allah? Go ahead, Persian Empress.
Assalamualaikum. Good morning.
Morning.
Okay. Okay, my question is kind of surrounds family dynamics. And this pertains to like maybe a member or members have, you know, pretty much left the cult, however. But they're dealing with a lot of family dynamics, you know, and people may, even in their family, may know how they have, where they stood for many years. You know, they know that's
Right.
nothing new to them, however. But there's a constant thing with kind of when they in conversations with you, maybe on a phone or in person, doesn't matter, where there's kind of this, they bait you. They always have to get something. You know, I know a lot of people may experience it. Some people may handle it differently, you know, according to. But I know I'm the kind of person that, you know, I'll reach my limit if I think it even sounds like, you know what, and I'll still be patient with you, but I'll reach my limit. And once I reach that limit, it's like no turning back. You're disingenuous. You're
Yep.
lying. And I try to, like, you know, pretty much bite my tongue. You know, I know some people may be a little bit more patient than I am as a person.
Yeah.
I know I can be impatient, but but what I kind of experience, you know, and I know sure others have, you know, where, you know, a family member or, you know, friends will say stuff in reference to, well, setting up a organization where Muslims speak out is kind of, you know, just as worse as being in a cult, because you're trying to kind of like coercing people.
Oh, you broke up for a second.
Ever, and it may cause domestics, you know, towards, you know, particularly females, you know, who may be further, you know, dismissed by their families or just, you know, families in general, you know, and it's causing more dissension between Muslims, and that Muslims,
Right.
proper Muslims do not speak public about their issues amongst the community, you know, the Islamic
Yep.
community.
This actually
Right.
comes up in one of the questions, and in this sphere or in this realm of dealing with Sufi cult, they call it the Fitna argument, right? And it's a common tactic. It's gaslighting. It's they all use the same thing. Oh, you're creating fitna. You're creating fitna. I want to let me see if it comes up in the next question. If it's the next question. Oh yeah, this is the perfect one. So perfect timing. You didn't even know. Look at that. Look how Allah had that. So like you just segued into the next question.
Excellent.
So and we'll talk about this because like the question what that popped up was, what is the most frustrating part about informing cult members? So like you said, everybody's different, right? I'm a person that's like if someone's trying to like antagonize or like, you know, when we're in family chats or whatever, I'll jump. All right, you want to do this? Let's do it, right? Type of person.
Absolutely.
You know, so like that's how I am. Other people aren't. So other people are, and that's not always a good thing. It's a good thing sometimes, but it's not always. That will make people cut me off. Like I'm the person that was like, I don't care about certain attachments. I care about my attachment with Allah, right?
Absolutely.
But that's not taking that as an extreme level, like how I do sometimes, is not also effective all the time when you're actually trying to guide other people, right? I'll be quick to like, I'll just move on. All right, cool. But
Absolutely.
I think when you're in those situations, one is, and we have to look at the example of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, because that's our best example for everything. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam never minced words, right? He was always very clear with his communication. So when there's certain things, and I've noticed this with just dealing with a lot of PMOA members, for instance, I'll give an example. Say we're in a family chat or friend chat or whatever, and you want to tell people that the seven sultan thing is shirk, right? But you want to do it kind of like in a way that it's going to be acceptable to them. So what you do is you post the ayat that says Allah is one. Okay. And you're like, yeah, that's gonna like let them like, they're gonna hear that and they're gonna like, oh wait, that means there's Allah didn't divide himself into seven sultans, and they're gonna help wake them up. I've found from my personal experience that tactic never works with PMOA members, because you could give them something and they will put it into their own context and be like, yeah, and it'll actually get to a point like that actually supports why my sheikh is the greatest. And it's like, what? wait, that wasn't my intent at all, you know?
Absolutely.
So my thing has always been just say it clearly, like post the ayat and say, this is why your shake is wrong, right? And there's respectful ways to do that, but you'll find
Mhm.
that this gets into the other part of it is that for instance, you could literally quote exactly what Rasul said, and they'll say, oh, you're being disrespectful.
Absolutely.
Or
And, right. And you get impatient with the BS. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. Yep. I have, that's one of the things I have to work on as well, my patience. Well, I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit more patient because I've dealt with some conversations with individuals and others are like, I wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes with that person because the stuff they say is so ridiculous. But what helps me is I remember I used to be like that. I used to be in that mindset. So it's like,
Mhm.
it took me years to wake up. So it might take years for this person to wake up, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you reach a limit. It's like you got 30 days.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We can do this no
Well,
longer. I refuse to engage
it,
further. Right. You're playing
it's
games.
fun. It's funny. And they mention this in the book is, so like you talk about what's the most frustrating things with like dealing with like, say, cult members when you're out of the cult. One of the things you mentioned was that nobody believes you, right? Nobody believes you, even though like they might have seen this stuff with their own eyes, they might not believe you. And this depends on like the level of like for instance, when with my personal situation, people call and ask, hey, what happened? I'm like, oh yeah, the sheikh ordered my ex-wife to divorce me, right? Then they'll say, no, that didn't happen. Sheikh didn't say that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, okay, you don't want to believe me? All right, whatever. Same thing like this people like there's a dispute going around about whether Mubarak Jelani actually told people to make tawaf around the shrine. And it's like this one there's people like I know that they've done it. They've actually done the act, but then like, oh, our sheikh didn't tell us to do this. Why the hell were you doing it if you don't believe the sheikh told you to do it? Right. So it gets into denial.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing that comes up is victim blaming, right? Oh, you should have done this. And that's where it comes like, oh, you're creating fitna. It's you're starting your own cult. All these different things that they say, and it's funny how the people that are either in the cult or are apologists for the cult, they question your motives more than they actually question the motives of their cult leader, right? They'll still like say, oh, you're not sincere. You have an agenda. I don't know how many times people have had hour conversations with me just trying to figure out my intentions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they
Like,
love hearing stories. They enjoy hearing stories. And I'm not here to entertain you. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
exactly. Exactly. That's why usually for me, because I kind of know this and I don't like being I don't like the attention being on me, and I know how this stuff works. Because I read this book before I actually started even like speaking out or whatever. I was like, oh, so this is what's going to happen. So I don't ever really talk about my own personal situation, right? Because I don't want people, because that's what they're looking for. Like, oh yeah, he's just mad because XYZ happened to him. But when they have conversations with me, I never actually talk about what happened to me. So I'm like, I don't want them to like give them that excuse, that leeway, because as soon as I say, oh, this happened to me, oh, so that's why you're doing it, because you're mad. No, because it's wrong, you know. But they don't scrutinize their sheikh. They don't scrutinize anything else, but they will scrutinize the victims. And this happens it's sad, it happens in every abusive situation. Like we'll go to the classic one, right? I think they're called like rape myths or whatever, right? And we were like, okay, this lady got raped. Well, what was she doing in the club? Why was she wearing that outfit?
Mm-hmm.
Why we start doing the same thing, right? We start blaming the victims, scrutinizing the victims instead of saying, oh, well, whatever they were doing. Yes, I joined a cult. Yes, I was in this TMWay community. Yes, I took bayat to the sheikh. Does that excuse all the wrong that happened? No, it doesn't. Right. And really what it boils down to, like the person or the situation you're talking about where they're like, oh, well, what you're doing is worse than the cult and you're creating fitna and this could happen, that can happen. The objective for them is they want to force you into silence. They aren't comfortable with hearing about these things, right? So they want you to be silent, and they come from an angle where it looks like they're trying to look out for everybody. Okay, so how are you going to address the victims, right? You want to talk like, oh, we should deal with it privately, right? When did Rasul deal with the issues that he was dealing with during his time privately? Did he go and say, hey, yo, you buried your daughter? You shouldn't do this, man. It's wrong. No, Allah put it in the Quran. Recite it for everybody. We're still talking about it today. Very public. For 1,400 years, it's been very public that Arabs used to bury their daughters while they're alive, their baby newborns. We know about it. Public, right? What about everything else that was dealt with? What about even the slander of Aisha, right? The slander of Aisha, radiallahu anha, where the Munafiq started a rumor that Aisha committed adultery or fornicated with one of the Sahabas. Did Rasulullah say, let's deal with it privately? Allah revealed ayat in the Quran and made it very public. We have had multiple hadiths about it, of Sahabas talking about Rasulullah said this, Abu Bakr said this, Aisha said this. Very public, right? So these people that come with these tactics, what I say to them, this is my own personal stance on it, I put the burden on them. Like, okay, you want to deal with this privately? So go deal with it privately. But you know what? They will not contact any of those people, any of the abusers, any of the cult members, any of the cult leaders privately to try to deal with the situation. And on top of that, like people who say this about R2F, right? Oh, you're putting stuff out there publicly and this and that. We have contacted Mubarak Jalani, Zainab Adams, all of his children, all the leaders of PMOA, the Shura Council. We contacted them privately multiple times, and we've never received a response. So, like you said, at a certain point, it's like, okay, we're not going to keep, like, that's the definition of insanity. You keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Okay, so we did do that privately. One of the common things that I kept hearing was like, oh, if you talk about the terrorist stuff, that's going to cause people to attack the land. Such bullcrap, right? The reason why people like the Dogger and these other people from Rochester plan to attack the lands wasn't because R2F started talking about the stuff that TMOA Al Fukra actually did. No, they started wanting to attack them because of the stuff that they found out that TMOA was guilty of, right? Zainab Adams' father and his crew planned to bomb a place in Canada. They murdered people across the United States, did other crimes. Multiple individuals blew up buildings, burned down buildings, assassinated people. These things are fact. They're documented on record, online, that everybody has access to. But you want to ignore all that and say, hey, don't talk about this publicly. So, I mean, these people, I don't have much patience myself for these people that try to seem like they're these impartial bystanders and they're trying to look out the best for everybody, but at the same time they're ignoring all the people that have been affected negatively by this abuse. And at the same time, they won't say 2 words to the people that are guilty of all this, but they feel comfortable coming to us who are speaking out, who have the courage to actually say something about this. Then you want to come to us and say, hey, you shouldn't be saying anything. You should deal with it privately. You should deal with it behind closed doors. Okay, go ahead and do that then. Let me know how you do. Let me know the results you get. Let's see. Big salam.
I didn't know you dealt with them privately like that, because I've been wanting to do that myself, and they've contacted me like years ago, calling Dumpster and all these guys out of guilt, and I'm planning to contact them, and it ain't gonna go good, but it's just that.
Well,
but I'm dealing with these are narcissist people, and the one thing about these particular people, they benefited off of this thing to the point where now they hide it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know myself, a couple of people got their house taken away from them when they left the land. You know, you have no way to give your children inheritance, none of that. And then they just, like you said, silence you and all that. So now I'm trying to figure out, like, what would be the civilized way to go about this thing without going to jail. But at the same time, I can't. These dudes, they not built for this thing. So I want to deal with them like Trump. Just go with my money and deal with them legally and finish them.
Well, here's the thing, right? Well, let's look at the objective, and this is kind of like, one thing is clear when you're dealing with this stuff is a lot of things are muddy, right? There's a lot of things in a gray area, right? So this is why, and as far as like R2S position, is that we really focus on the Quran and Sunnah because that is the clearest thing, right? That's the clearest criteria that you're going to be able to, understand something and deal with something. But like, we have to look at the goal. What's the goal? What's the whole goal as a Muslim for being here? The whole goal of a Muslim, that why Allah created us and put us on this earth, is to worship Him, do good deeds, pass the test so that we can go to Jannah. That's our goal. We want to go to Jannah. Okay. Now we put that into the context of these groups like TMOA. And then you'll hear people say like, well, you're affecting people's lives and, there could be repercussions about this and that. Okay. So are you saying that TMOA existing is helping people get to Jannah? No, it's not. It's actually taking thousands of people away from Jannah, away from the path of Jannah. So if TMOA did not exist, those thousands of people will have a better chance of getting to Jannah. But then they'll say, people say, well, a lot of people are only Muslim because of TMOA, which is true. But if you're only Muslim because of TMOA, are you really Muslim? Or are you Jelaniite? Or do you practice Jelaniism or TMOAism? So my position is, and there's no right or wrong answer when you take this position. Like, if a person has the time, is prepared for like the backlash and fight and all the things that come with like seeking legal answers to a lot of this stuff, I have no problem with it, right? At some point, inshallah, all of us and others need to band together, because there are avenues to have a class action suit brought against TMOA. This is something that can be done, right? But it takes people, a dedicated group of people, to say, okay, I'm going to put my time and energy to do this, to seek out the right lawyers we need to do, to seek out gathering people together to be witnesses and be named, all these different things, right? Because you have people who, like you said, lost property, families destroyed, lost income, lost all these different things, right? So I have no problem with doing that, right? Because we've given them multiple opportunities, and that's what we have to do. You have to give them, you have to follow the Quran and Sunnah. So the first thing that we do as the Quran and Sunnah is, when you're addressing people in wrong, you do address them privately, right? You try to advise them privately. If they do not acknowledge or respond or change their ways from that private rebuttal, and what they're doing is affecting people in the public, then you have to deal with them in the public, right? So TMOA has had multiple opportunities to deal and address these things in correct ways with private advisement from R2F and other individuals, okay? But they have not taken advantage of it. So like, if you have a personal thing with, say, a certain specific leader has done X, Y, Z, right? Reach out to them privately. They probably won't respond or respond negatively. And it's like, okay, you had your opportunity. Now I'm going to go to the next wave. I'm going to take the next step. But it all takes effort. It all takes time. It's not a quick process. There's stress that is involved with that. There's a certain amount of re-traumatization that you may go through. So you have to really kind of like seek advisement and counsel and see if you're actually ready to engage in something like that. I'll relate it to, some of us have dealt with like custody issues because of this. And this stuff, mine was going on for three years, is still kind of going on. And you get to a point where like it sucks everything out of you. And not only not sucks everything out of you, not only financially, but also like physically, spiritually, and all these different things. So you have to really consider that. And I would say talk to the people that are close to you and just look at it from that angle. The one thing I wanted to mention real quick before I kind of went over, but we have one more slide to go and then go. But I wanted to mention this. Being a victim or survivor or whatever you want to call yourself, which is a whole different conversation. Someone who has gone through what we have gone through, spiritual abuse, being involved in a cult. Some people have been transgressed, suffered different traumas. Don't let these people think that you don't have a right to be pissed off, right? They'll come to you and say, oh, you're just mad. Whether you're mad or not, that doesn't change. I can be mad. Someone transgressed upon me. I can be mad, right? You have a right to be mad for whatever transgression. We all have a right to be extremely angry and mad that someone diverted us from the true path of Islam and was teaching us shirk and bid'ah, stuff that was going to clearly throw us into the hellfire if we were on it when we passed away. Why wouldn't you be mad? Why wouldn't you care? Why wouldn't you be upset? Right? So don't let these people take that right away from you. In Islam, we have rights, right? In Islam, we are encouraged to show anger for the sake of Allah and show happiness for the sake of Allah. So yes, the stuff that's happening to people in TMWA, the stuff that happened to me, the stuff that happened to my children, my brothers, my friends, that's currently happening, yes, that should anger you. The stuff that Mubarak Jelani, the stuff that now Zainab and the Shura Council, the stuff that they taught and are continuing to teach, that pisses me off. As Muslims, that should piss all of us off, right? So don't let them take that away from you. The last question I'm going to cover today, and this is the end of chapter 1 of the book, is does an abuser, excuse me, does an abuser need direct contact to control victims? And I thought this was a very interesting question that was in the book. And again, if you read this book, you're going to really think that this guy was a part of the PMOA. I swear you will, right? Listen to that question. Does an abuser need direct contact to control victims? And before I get into that, let's check the chat. Assalamu alaikum, Jawad. How you doing? He says all spiritual abuse. Spiritual abuse tactics also ensure the abuse continues with future generations. It fosters irrational compliance through obedience and shame. Exactly. And the multiple generation thing is really deep because the first generation that deals with it, right, they might find something wrong with it, but then they find a way to cope with it and deal with it and normalize it. Like for instance, when myself, my brother, and Hanif Williams, when Mubarak Jelani basically forced our ex-wife to divorce us, and then certain person that's a long-standing member in TMOA, when he heard about it, all he did was say, oh, they do that all the time. As if it was like, someone that takes out the trash. So like that means like for 40 years, this type of behavior was normalized. And you'll see that they'll be saying that for a lot of different types of things that happen to you. Oh, that happens all the time. And it's like, well, that's not normal. That's not normal. You know how you, like for you TMOA members that listen to this later, how you can tell something that's not normal? Go to your local masjid that's a non-TMOA masjid and go tell the imam or make a public statement of, we do XYZ. If you feel some apprehension about saying that, chances are it's not normal behavior. The name of the book is The Sufi Lighthouse by Bill Whitehouse. Interesting. Sufi Lighthouse by Bill Whitehouse. You can find it on Amazon. Just type in the Sufi Lighthouse. I don't know if you can see it from here, but that's what the cover looks like. It's a very good book. Very, very good book. So the last question is, does an abuser need direct contact to control victims? And this specifically ties to or relates to TMOA. Because what? Mubarak Jelani was in Pakistan for pretty much 40 years, right? So many people will say, well, how is he controlling y'all? How is he a cult leader when he's all the way in Pakistan, right? Well, we know that it happens because we lived it. So no, an abuser does not need direct contact to control victims, right? Again, it goes back to establishing trust. Once you trust somebody and put all your trust in that person, or the majority of your trust in that person, they can control you from anywhere, right? And a lot of people in TMOA, especially the second, third, and fourth generations, that trust was established through who? Their parents. Their parents, their family members. They're like, oh, this is a trustworthy person. In their household, they see a picture, one picture of a man held up, right? Who's that? Oh, that's your sheikh, and he's going to guide you to paradise, right? You grew up hearing Abuji said, Abuji said, Abuji said, or may my Murshid live forever, my Murshid, the sheikh, throughout your whole life growing up, right? So the people that Allah has established for you to trust most in this world, whether it's your parents, and as you grow up, your friends, as you grow up, your other family members and friends, and then your spouse, everybody is saying, you can trust Mubarak Jelani. You can trust the cult leader. You can trust Zainab Adam. And now trust you, they got your trust. Now they can be in Timbuktu, and if this person you trust says, hey, tell so-and-so that I need $1,000 and they have to get it in a week, you're going to go find $1,000 and give them a week. Tell so-and-so that they can't watch TV anymore. You're going to stop watching TV because you trust them, right? And in my opinion, just because of what we dealt with, it's actually easier to control people that way, right? It's actually easier to control people that way, because one of the things that you'll see in all cults is that, especially if they're within the cult, is they have to create a barrier between them and the people, right? So when they're first starting out the cult, they'll be involved with the people, they'll be living with them, sleeping with them, eating with them. But once they establish that trust, and then the people start putting them up to elevated stations, that's where they start putting other people in between them, right? In the context of our cult, it was the administration, the Khalifas, the Amiras, now the Shura Council. This is the barrier between the people and the cult leader, right? And why I say it's easier for cult leaders to have control when there's a distance is because what happens when you see someone every day, right? What's the saying? Familiarity breeds enmity, right? When you see someone every day, they become a normal person to you. You see their faults. You see, like, oh, wait, like, just imagine for a lot of us, if Mubarak Jelani was in the United States, in our communities, and we've seen him every day, a lot of us would be like, wait a minute, this guy's telling us to eat less, sleep less, and talk less. He surely ain't following at least one of them, right? We'd be like, hey, there's something wrong with that, right? We'd be able to see the times that he gets angry for no reason. We'd be able to see the times where he's making irrational decisions, right? We'd be able to see the times that he's watching half-nude ladies on WWE wrestling. We'd be able to see all that and be like, wait a minute, this guy's supposed to be my spiritual guide? He's worse than me, right? It's the same thing that they did when Mubarak Jelani's children came over here. What'd they do? They had like a handler around them. You couldn't like go right up to them and say anything to them. You had to go through like channels and different things, right? That keeps that separation. Why? Because that lets the cult leader control information, right? It prevents people from disclosing things that they see, right? We're even talking about Zainab Adams, right? Having people sign a non-disclosure agreement. They don't want people to disclose certain information or certain secrets. And the biggest thing is that plausible deniability, because now when the cult leader is saying do X, Y, Z, and they're overseas in a whole nother country, that message is relayed through that middle barrier, those administrators. So whenever the sheikh makes a dumb decision or something that goes against the Quran and Sunnah, people automatically, instead of blaming the sheikh or blaming the cult leader, they will blame the administration. Okay, yeah, I don't agree with that. So I have all my trust in the sheikh, It has to be one of these administrators that's lying on him, or they mess up the message, or whatever things that make it work in our heads. Okay. So yes, you do not, a cult leader does not need to be in direct contact with people to control them, right? Or to spiritually abuse people. It actually, in my opinion, actually makes it easier for them, especially when you're talking about in the context of TMOA, where it's multiple generations of abuse that's occurring. Okay, so that's it for the questions. That's it for today's presentation. We kind of went over by a half an hour, which is okay. We had some good conversation. Is there any questions, concerns, topics, or anybody that wants to go into before we jump off this week's session?
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Walaikum salam.
I have a question. I was trying to wait.
Okay.
Yeah, I was trying to wait for you to kind of get through your thing, and maybe you can save it for next week. But just food for thought. If you want to answer, you can. But say if a person, they are hearing everything that you're saying, they agree, I'm in a cult. I know it's a cult. But number one, I don't believe in the seven sultans. I don't believe in the deviant beliefs, but I'm a member. I mean, I'm part of this community, but I'm following the Quran and the Sunnah. I mean, I don't see any problem with me being in the cult. My beliefs are not deviant and my actions are not deviant. I'm not doing any bid'ah or innovation, but I'm just a member. And so is there any situation or scenario where you would say that a person can just exist as a member of the cult and not be doing any deviant beliefs or actions and it be okay?
So we probably should answer this now. That way I can have you, I'll put something down there, but I want people to actually give because I don't have all the answers, right? But these are one of those things that you need multiple perspectives on to kind of, because everybody's situation is a little bit different. So the first thing that comes to my mind is we have to go to the Quran and the Sunnah. And the one hadith that comes to mind, and I think I don't know if I think you have it in the 40 hadith rooms. I didn't check them all yet, but just a little advertisement. Inshallah, soon we'll have a hadith series, and it's going to go over hadiths that's specific to cults, Islamic cults. But the one hadith that pops in my mind is the hadith where Rasulullah said that when there's an evil, when there's wrong, there's 3 ways that we have to handle it. There's 3 ways, okay? So if you're this person that follows the Quran and Sunnah, doesn't have any of the deviant beliefs, and you're saying, but can I still be in TMOA? Okay. Even though myself, I have promoted the idea of like, basically your priority is first your belief. Don't forget about like whether you should be in or out of TMOA first and worry about your belief, right? That means you have to follow the Quran and Sunnah. You have to get rid of those deviant, shirkish beliefs. You have to practice the Sunnah. You can't make tawaf around shrines and get rid of all that first, right? That's when you realize, okay, now you got to that point where you're on the Quran and Sunnah. Good. Then the next step is, now what? Can I just live in the cult and go to the Eid and still have my family and friends and just stay upon my path? Well, Rasulullah said that when there's wrong, you have to deal with it in 3 ways. The first way is you stop the wrong with your hand. Okay. So if you're going to remain in TMOA, then your first option is you have to go stop the wrong. So you'd have to go to a meeting and say, Zainab Adams, you cannot be our leader, right? That's like a first stop, right? That's one wrong that's right out there open for everybody. You'd have to go and start trying to prevent these things actively, right? We already know the result of what that's going to happen is you're going to get kicked out. They're going to kick you right to the street, right? As soon as you start challenging what they're doing or saying, they're going to kick you out. So that's your first answer. You're going to get kicked out. But at least you did your due diligence and you followed what Rasulullah said, is you tried to stop the wrong. When you go to the Eid and they start making tawaf around the shrine, you should go out in front of everybody and say, we're not allowed to do this as Muslims. This is bid'ah and possibly shirk. when you go and you see someone post a video of them making sajda to a grave, you should go be very verbal in your little chat rooms and say, this is shirk, this is haram, we cannot do this, which will lead most likely to you getting kicked out. So that's the first option. The second option that Rasulullah said is that you use your tongue, which I kind of touched into that, right? Because you're not going to be able to stop with your hands, the whole Jamaat from making tawaf, right? You can't physically grab Noor and throw her off of being the imam. So most likely you're going to have to speak. You have to use your tongue. You have to use your text messages. You have to use your social media platform to speak out against the wrong. We know what's going to happen against that. You're going to get kicked out, right? So first two options, they get kicked out. The third option, which I know a lot of you guys are thinking, is like, okay, well, I hate it in my heart, right? That's the third option. Rasulullah said, I can hate it in my heart. And here is a prime example of why we have to understand what Rasulullah is saying and how the scholars and how, Islam teaches us to understand the hadiths. You can read that hadith and say, oh, I could just hate it in my heart. That means I could follow the Quran and Sunnah in my heart and in my house, and I could just hate all these wrong things that are happening in TMOA, and then I'll be good. No, not quite. Because when we get into explaining what does hate it in your heart actually mean, hating it in your heart is also accompanied by separating yourself from the wrong. Okay, you separate yourself from the wrong. So you can't hate something in your heart and live amongst it. Again, there's context in this because there's some people that would be like, okay, I'm setting myself up so me and my family can leave, right? I can't leave now because I'll be homeless. These are things that you gotta kind of consider. But you should be making effort to separate yourself, an active effort to separate yourself from that falsehood. Otherwise, you truly don't hate it in your heart, right? I mean, we could bring up so many different examples of this from the Quran and Sunnah, okay? But we don't have time for that. But the moral of the story is, and if anybody has any other context or any other position to present, please do, because this is actually a very good topic, and we can continue it into next week as well. All three of those options that were given to us by Rasulullah lead to us leaving the cult. Whether we get kicked out for trying to stop something with our hands, whether we get kicked out for speaking out against something with our tongues and writing and these types of things, or whether we make effort to leave the situation ourselves because we hate it in our heart. And Rasulullah said the least form of the action is to hate in your heart. So as Muslims, we're trying to do the best of our ability, right? We have to do the best. So we all have the ability to speak out against something, okay? So, and then there's another conversation of whether speaking out has more good than harm, whether you should do it or not. But we all know the good that comes from speaking out against the falsehood. Either way, no matter what you do, if you're following the Quran and Sunnah, it's going to lead to you not being in the community. So after you get your belief set correct, Quran and Sunnah, the next step is to ask yourself, why am I here? And should I be here? And the natural progression of that is no, because I think we've seen it. We've seen people who have tried to take that position, right? Yeah, but eventually they end up being even worse than I guess R2F members, because they see this stuff every day and it starts eating at their soul and then they get out. So that's my answer for that one. Do you have any other addition or other context, or does anyone else want to share anything else?
I got experience with that. There was one brother on Red House. He didn't want to come out for Salat. He refused to come out for Salat. And people spoke out against it. People let him know privately. They ran us up out of there. They ran us up out of the Red House. They gonna run you up out of there, bro. They get your ass from around them people, man. They gonna get you. You can't be around them. Leave them people alone. Get from around them. Millionaires only hang out with millionaires. Millionaires don't hang out with people on welfare, bro. Leave them
Yep.
niggas alone. Sound like them.
Thanks, Salam. And just to add to that, for people that are in financial like ties, like situations, like say for instance, you have a house on the land, and you have wife, children, and you're all kind of on the same page, and you're like, we need to get out of here, but we don't have a way. This is what R2F is for. We have funds and services specifically to help people get out of the cult. We have people that have open homes. You need somewhere to go until you get on your feet. We have, alhamdulillah, we have people that can provide that. An open home to yourself, not like you're living with somebody. You're living by yourself, and you can get on your feet. Okay, you may need, maybe need $1,000 to like, I need $1,000 to do XYZ, and then I could like totally like detach myself. There's nothing wrong with asking help, right? There's nothing wrong with asking for help, even though, we have, especially men, we have like, I don't want to ask for help, whatever, but this is what we're here for, right? This is what we're, all of us that are donating money and having monthly fees, going to R2F and paying Zakat fund. This is what this is for, to help people. So take advantage of that. Help us help others. And it's totally confidential, and we keep it secret. We're not going to blast anybody or make anybody feel guilty for needing help. Allah puts us in situations, and let us get some of that blessings. And you're going to be able to save yourself a lot faster by the more you separate from all that falsehood. And but that's what I got for that. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'm gonna give a few seconds for the lag to catch up, but I'll talk about next week is chapter 2, where we're characterizing spiritual abuse. We talk more about the definition of spiritual abuse and go over some of the characteristics of spiritual abuse. And again, if you have any other topics, you can message me privately. We don't have to stick with the theme of the book. If you just want to talk about one thing, or anything different, we can do that. Let's see, what else do I have? Okay, so Friday nights, 8 o'clock again, we have the Tafsir show with Mubarak, which is very important for all of us to attend. If you can't attend the live, watch it, the next day or sometime through the week. He goes right through the Quran and gives the Tafsir, an explanation from the scholars and how it relates to deviant cults in Islam. I think that's it. We have Ramadan coming up soon, so we're going to be focusing more of our content on more religious stuff and less cult stuff, inshallah. And look forward to the Hadith series that will be coming out sometime in the future. Will be very beneficial. And again, for anybody that's out there, we're always looking for people to help, to contribute, whatever skill, whatever time, whatever you have to offer. There's some way we can make that available so that you can help out. You don't have to, whatever it is, even if you only have like an hour a week. Like, I know specifically we need people that willing to be like video editors, even producers, show producers, writers, content, all these different things. We'll need people that can give advice, like Baina and Amr did just earlier in the show about how to deal with things from like a therapy or a counselor perspective, that they have the knowledge in these things and can give good sound advice. So again, if you're willing to help out, it's totally volunteer. Your rewards with Allah, but we don't ask more from people than what they can give. So if you can only give an hour, 30 minutes a week, whatever, if you want to proofread, you can proofread. If you want to just be on Facebook and post our stuff on Facebook, we could do that, or whatever other social media we have out there. Get to a point where, it kind of ties back, and I'm kind of rambling here, but I'll end on this. It kind of ties back to like when Lucille asked, when does like these feelings end? And I mentioned how like there's no like top of the hill, there's no like end of the journey. But for me, in my personal opinion, I think there's different stages that we all go through, and you go through one stage, revert back to another stage, and keep going. But I think part of that light at the end of the tunnel is getting to a point where you're actually helping others from experiencing the same things that we experience, or helping others escape those experiences. And R2F has the platform that we can all start giving back, right? In any little form, in any little skill that we have. Even if like, okay, say your skill is like, I plan stuff. I can plan parties, I can plan Eids, I can plan events. We have an R2F event coming up soon. Throw your name in the hat. You could, be a part of that. And it's not like a situation where like how we experienced in TMOA, where it's like preferential treatment to people. And if you're related to somebody, no, if you want to help, we're going to let you help. Right. We have a very talented writer writing for our WordPress account. Right. This person has a great skill in writing. They have a certain amount of time they can dedicate, and they do that at their own leisure. Right. We have a person who's good at video editing. So they take whatever time they have to make little clips and do edits, right? Me, I could talk, so I'm on here talking. So I encourage everybody to reach out to me or anybody else they know that's part of R2F to volunteer their services, because, and again, it's something that we could do for the rest of our lives and get blessings from Allah and help us, this can really help us get to paradise, inshallah. So that's it for this week. Inshallah, we'll see you guys next week. And that'll be the last show before Ramadan, I believe. So we'll see if we want to continue the talk on spiritual abuse during Ramadan, or if we want to make it more Islamic during Ramadan. Because some of this stuff, Ramadan, you want to be focused on your deen. And some of this stuff could be triggering and could be, we don't want to have that type of energy during Ramadan. But we'll see, and you guys can let me know. All right, assalamu alaikum. Well, let me close out. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.